New incarnations of the Fantastic Four are making their way into Marvel Snap throughout all of July, and dare I say that this season looks a little bit fantastic.
Say that again?
When Mr. Fantastic passes you the vial, you respond by saying, "Thank you, sir, may I have another?" He is a 2/2 that gives a card in your hand either -1 cost or +2 power at the end of every turn, meaning he will accrue value over the course of the game. Sort of like, if you ask me, a better Phastos or perhaps a little bit of a worse Surge. Now, the Surge comparison is the one that is the strongest here. This is a 2/2 that discounts and adds power. There's a natural comparison to Surge to be made, but I do think that on the continuum of Phastos to Surge, it ends up somewhere in the middle. Which is not to say that I think this card is going to be bad by any means. I think this card is going to be a very solid, typical Season Pass staple-ish 2-cost card. But I think that mostly because its competition has been sort of decimated over the past few months. As usual, when they do a 2-cost Season Pass card, you have to compare it to not only what exists now, but the pedigree. Because I think a lot of the time when they do a card like this, people are like, it's Iron Patriot again, it's Sam Wilson again, it's Merlin again, even though I think Merlin is sort of demonstrably less dominant than either of those two were in their unnerfed state. I do think that this is even worse than Merlin, likely, but it has a more obvious effect on the game if you start hitting stuff that really matters. I think the Surge comparison, where I think Surge may be like an 8 out of 10, this would be like a 7 out of 10, is the one that's going to inform how many decks this actually goes in, and the fact that you can play these decks and not necessarily like guarantee that you have one of these on turn 2, but the more of that effect you want, you typically are gonna enjoy seeing it. And also, I think this one goes not necessarily in more spaces than Surge, but it just does good stuff that you're usually gonna get to actually do. A lot of the time with Surge, the issue is I drew something, it doesn't fit in my game plan. With this card, you're buffing and increasing the flexibility of the cards that you already are game planning for. And I think that dynamic will shine when you play with Mr. Fantastic First Steps, because this is a card that helps the things that you already are forming your game plan around. When you are playing a game of Marvel Snap, the cards that are in your hand are most of what you should be thinking about. You're thinking about them in the context of, how do I use what I know I have to get this game to be a win for me? Making those cards stronger can be really valuable. Of course, you know, there's definitely going to be the chance that you hit bad stuff, but that chance exists with Surge already. The real thing that this card doesn't have, that Surge does have, is that massive upside of, like, turn 3 Galactas and Gwenpools. But I do think that, like, you know, it's probably about as likely to hit the Gwenpool in your hand as it is to hit the Gwenpool on the top of your deck, yeah? So I think this card comes very, very, very close, and I do think that if they left the extra point of power on, this was originally Datamined as a 2/3, this would be a much, much, much stronger card, and I think it might actually go over Surge at that point because of just how impactful a 2/3 stat line is at 2. 2/3 for me is the equivalent of 3/5, where it's just like, this is as big as 2s really get without going out of your way to find something with a downside. So once you get to that 2/3 stat line and start really adding upside to it, it's basically impossible for the card to be bad. 2/2 is still a stat line that requires significant upside to be good, but we've seen it be good with Surge, and I think this card is in line with that. Herby starts at 2/3 and then cycles through activate abilities until you use one. He has 4 bespoke activated abilities, each of which you have to choose if you want to use it at the time you play him, because I don't think you're going to be getting them back. This is a card that has varying different effects. It seems very clear to me that this looks like a 2-drop analog to Nico Minoru. But I think the thing that makes Nico Minoru so different is that Nico Minoru has very clear peaks and valleys that are so far beyond what you could do on another 1-drop. You couldn't make a 1-drop that said destroy a card to draw 2, but you could put that text on Nico Minoru because it's 1 in 6. You probably couldn't make a 1-drop even that had Nico's text context of turning something into a demon, but you can put it on a Nico because it's 1 in 6. At 1 in 4, I think they have to be a lot more cautious with the stuff they put on here. It's got to be more generic and less high rolly and peaky, and there's got to be more consistency among the activate abilities. Activate ability number 1 is Herby gives you +2 energy next turn. Remember everything I said about consistency? This one feels like the one that's like, oh wow, I got to do this, it's awesome, Herby is in my deck to do this. I think this is going to be the high roll, and the other ones, which are largely points related, are the low rolls, so to speak, where it's just like getting 2 extra energy whenever you want it is super incredible, you are very happy with it, but you'll settle for just a very good 2. Herby, to me, looks like a legitimately powerful card in a world where mid-range strategies are good, in large part because of this ability. It's a little bit like, and not like, this is a pretty tortured comparison, it's a little bit like Surge, where it's a 2 that has the potential to be energy discount effectively, but the rest of the time, it's just doing good things on rate. This card starts at 2/3, it does powerful stuff. When I look at this, I see a card that is probably going to be pretty good, in large part because it has the upside of like turn 5, you give yourself 2 extra energy going into turn 6. That's obviously amazing. And then the rest of the time, you're just giving yourself points because that's kind of what every other one of these abilities does. Ability number 2 is an activate that gives 2 of your cards at other locations plus power. That is just free power. You are playing a card that is adding power to your other locations. That's a good thing to do. It's like a little Mr. Fantastic impression. I think that's very cute. It's good design. It's a good little reference here. But baseline, it's just giving stuff power. Now, the wording here was a little bit confusing. We'll have to see how it is. I don't know if it's 2 cards at other locations or if it's 2 cards at each other location. That would make it from, a 2/5 to a 2/7. Obviously, you're very interested in 2/7. Just went and looked at the wording. It's still confusing, but it does say 2 cards at each other location. I think that means it's the 2/7 reading. I just don't want to commit to it in case I'm wrong and people yell at me in the comments. Third one is activate, create a rock here, set its power to 4. Again, 2/7, you're just happy with that. It's a created card. It works with Mockingbird. You're happy with that. There's just stuff here that's solid. It's just, oh, nice. I get good points out of this. It's a good thing to do. I enjoy playing Herby. I'm happy I did that. Yeah, it's green power, and yeah, it takes up a board space. I get it. It's probably a little bit worse than the previous one, but we're also entering a season where filling up the board is something the other Fantastic Four cards, at least a few of them, want you to do. So, maybe there's real upside for a thing like this. And his last activate ability doubles his power. Obviously, this could be really powerful. There are tons of really playable and good buffs in the game right now. Things like Surge, Galacta, Gwenpool, Mr. Fantastic First Steps is coming out. Lots of stuff that could enable this double ability to be a lot more than it looks like on the tin, which is 2/6. I think this card, basically, between all of these abilities, has a lot of power in it. The real question is just, how big is the downside for including it in your deck? How many 2s can we actually fit in here? But when I look at this card, I see a card that I could very easily play in all sorts of mid-range soup decks with very little addition to the deck. Right now, this is a pretty solid card in the context of, the current version of the mid-range soup deck that is playing Mr. Sinister. That could just be Herby, and it might get a little bit better. And that kind of stuff is interesting to me. It's compelling to me. I think the card is solid. I think it does strong stuff. I think a lot of mid-range soup decks will end up using this as a powerful 2-drop, in as much as they are able to fit that in their deck. This is a card that I would have my eye on. It is the first card available for tokens in the season, so that is worth keeping an eye on because Mr. Fantastic is on the season pass. And the next card we're going to talk about, we're actually not sure how it's coming out. The Fantasticar, a 4/7 activate that gives your end of turn cards +2 power. Just baseline, it's a pretty good 4, and it fits the profile of 4s that have been good in the past, which is 4, pretty big body, technically gives you more points than it would normally be Shang-Chi-able, but it can't get Shang-Chi'd because the points are dispersed across multiple locations. There are a couple of things to talk about here, so before we actually start talking about the card, we're going to talk about the potential release mechanism. This was originally datamined to be the premium season pass card. In the most recent datamines, it was changed on Snap.Fan to be something else. I don't know how this card is going to release. I don't know if it is going to be in the premium season pass. I have been operating under the assumption that it has. And I do want to talk about the possibility that it does, because to me, that is a situation that a lot of people have been preemptively very worried about. I was originally one of those people. What if it turns out that you need this card in order to play the Fantastic Four deck? That's actually quite bad. The Fantastic Four season is already built around synergies between the Fantastic Four. That's a cool thing to do. Multiple of the Fantastic Four scale off of buffs that Reed Richards, of course, gives them. They all, or not all of them, two of them, Johnny and Ben, have end of turn abilities that are like, they all have end of turn abilities. Two of them have like end of game abilities that are part of their end of turn abilities. Invisible Woman synergizes with all of the end of turn abilities. This card synergizes with all of the end of turn abilities. It's very clear that there's like an idea of a deck here, but here's the interesting bit. If it turns out the deck isn't playable without Fantasticar, it probably won't be playable until Invisible Woman comes out anyway, which is the last card in the season. If that happens, then all you have to do is wait for Fantasticar to enter packs the next month. What is the difference between having this card 6 days early when Invisible Woman comes out on the premium season pass, or just waiting 6 actual days? Unlike what seems to have happened with Kid Omega, where it's like, we have to wait a month and it immediately goes into decks, I'm not sure Fantasticar is going into decks until we get Invisible Woman, until we get the Thing first steps, until we get Human Torch first steps, maybe until we get all of them. And that means that it's actually not as bad as I originally thought that this is on the premium season pass. It's not good in like whatever sense you want to objectively analyze it, but it's a lot less bad than I thought, because it won't matter until the full package of cards come out anyway. And by the time the full package of cards come out anyway, you are 6 days away from this card leaving the premium season pass and entering the Series 4 packs that cost 2,500 tokens or whatever, right? That's probably actually fine. So even in their worst case scenario, I think they're going to be fine, but there is another future worst case scenario that is possible here, which is, what if this card is just good right out of the box with stuff like Makari and Hydra Bob and like a Sandman shell? I don't consider that overly likely, but it's definitely possible. Like, it's definitely the kind of thing that has sort of been like, oh yeah, maybe that is actually a problem, because you have all of these cards. You got Mr. Fantastic coming out, you got Makari, you got Hydra Bob. You're probably not playing things that are like end of turn Thena type stuff, but like, what if this goes in the Thena deck? It probably doesn't. Don't get me wrong. Those cards scale more than this card will contribute to. It's not a good contributor with Bast. It probably doesn't go there. But, like, that's the nightmare scenario. Is that this card comes out, and whatever package it goes into that doesn't need the Fantastic Four to be successful, that's immediately successful. I think that would throw this system of, like, how are we doing with this stuff? Like, how are we, like, Marvel Snap, basically, like, dealing with, like, cards that are paywalled, right? I think that would be the scenario that throws it into the starkest relief. I don't really expect the decks with the F4 and Fantasticar in them to be really good for a little bit. I think it'll take a while for people to figure out what the hell they're supposed to be. But, and I also think it'll take a while for the people to just, like, get Invisible Woman, right? That's the last card of the season. I think the Thing is the one that comes out before her. Like, it's gonna take a while for people to get the cards that really matter. And until then, Fantasticar won't really matter. But it is definitely the kind of thing that a lot of people, I think, would overlook if the Kid Omega stuff hadn't just happened, but they're not going to overlook in this case. So I think probably they got lucky, maybe, that it might not actually be part of a good deck until the season is basically over. Human Torch First Steps is just kind of a beast. This is a 3-2 end of turn. It'll gain 1 power, and once per game, if the lane that he's in is full, it'll double instead. So 3-2, you play it on 3, end of turn it goes to 3, end of 4 it goes to 4, end of 5 it goes to 5, end of 6 it doubles, right? If you fill up that lane. And that is just baseline, like, fill up my lane, play me on turn 3, I'm a 3/10. People are pretty happy with that as is, not mentioning all the other things that this card can do when it comes to carrying buffs. Obviously, Mr. Fantastic is applying buffs, Surge is applying buffs, Galacta's applying buffs, Gwenpool's applying buffs, Silver Surfer's applying buffs. This guy's going to get big. This guy is going to be a really, really, really damn big guy. And I think that that is the kind of thing that really stands out about what this card is going to be, which is like, number one thing, this guy is going to be the world's most goated Sebastian Shaw. This guy is going to be everything Sebastian Shaw wishes he could be. Human Torch is just, that is what he is. This is like if Sebastian Shaw actually had the potential to like be a legitimate card in other contexts than Surfer. This is a card that is a build around card that is going to win you one lane, and the only question becomes, how invested in this do I have to be to make that happen? Not very, frankly, because it's already going to be like a 3-10 if you play it on 3 and fill up a lane. And then the follow-up questions are, how do I win other lanes? This guy just looks like a star to me. I don't necessarily think he's going to be the best card of all time. Like, he definitely does require, oh, I need to play him on 3. If I'm not playing him on 3, he kind of sucks. There are real requirements here, but whatever deck can get the most out of him, and there are a lot of really good buffers in the current metagame, whatever deck can do that without really sacrificing anything, that's going to be the deck that he shines in. Obviously, I think he's a solid buff to Surfer as well. I think this is also a season that probably leans pretty heavily on Shadow King if you're looking to counterplay this stuff, because it's not like this card is like, oh my god, it's the greatest card ever. Holy crap. I mean, like, here's the thing. This is not the thing. This is the Human Torch. This is a card that I'm not actually sure compares favorably to Captain Carter in a Surfer deck if you're buffing your stuff. But it does compare favorably in other contexts where it's like, if I'm playing this in my like Gwenpool Mysterio deck, where it's just like, I'm going to play this, it's just like a card that is good, and it doesn't matter when I play it, it'll double up or whatever, I'll carry a buff, put a buff on it, it'll go up to like 6 and double up on the final turn of the game, it'll be 12 or things like that, right? Like, that's the really interesting part for me. Where does this outcompete Captain Carter? Where does this outcompete Sebastian Shaw? Does this put its own package into contention for being one of the better packages in the game? And does the pronounced weakness to Shadow King end up making this card really awkward? Because that is a weakness that is very, very clear to me. All of this guy's power is green. Another place that kind of makes sense in my eyes for this is like the Athena deck that already is like kind of iffy on running Cassandra Nova. This is a card that like you bast it, you Agent Venom it, you get your extra point to begin with, you start with that, you're already playing maybe a Surge in there, things like that. And then you just sort of let him tick up in the way that you are typically willing to let things tick up when you play this deck. And that seems pretty compelling to me, too. You even have things like Juggernaut and Cosmo to turn off the interaction that is possible. So here's the thing. Ben Grimm, the thing first steps, 5/6, end of turn, +2 power. Once per game, if your side here is full, destroy an enemy card here with less power. And you might have seen me like looking at my screen there. I had to make sure the word instead wasn't in there. It's not. It just happens. So baseline, what we're talking about here is a card that if you play it on turn 5 is going to be a 5/10 that they can't Shang-Chi on the final turn that blows something up in the lane that it's in. It's really hard for a 5 to be objectively great. It's hard to do because 4s are so strong in this game and because 5 really limits what else you can play alongside it. If you're committing a big 5 to a lane, you are almost always saying, I am probably not backing this guy up a lot of the time. What this guy does have over the other big 5s, Devil Dinosaur, Ronin, and Darkhawk, is that there's not really interaction for him. You can't Shang-Chi him unless you slap that under an Invisible Woman because that thing happens end of turn. So that's just really, really strong. This is a card that with a Surge discount is one of the strongest plays you can make. I think if you get this guy out on 4, I mean, I guess that does make him Shang-Chi-able, unfortunately, right? But like the baseline profile of this card is, okay, I am just big. If you are doing things like Mysterio or late game fill-ups, I'm even better. I'm like the 5-drop Surge is sort of what I think about this card as, where it's like, you don't need me to be the greatest card of all time. 5-drop Sage, I should say. Where if you're involved in a struggle for one specific lane, like if there's like a Nexus out there or something like that, this guy is the biggest beast in the world. Like, he is just a monster. Just an absolutely disgusting card, right? When there are highly contested lanes, this guy gets better. And his baseline is an unshangable 5/10. And I think that that is sort of the argument for this guy. Baseline, unshangable 5/10, gets better if you are doing hard contests. I don't know if that's good enough. I genuinely don't. And filling up lanes when you're playing a 5-drop actually is a lot harder than people think it is, right? Like, it's hard to do that. Like, you are asking a lot. There are good discounts in this sort of context, right? There's like Surge, there's Mr. Fantastic. There are going to be some commonly played discounters. All those discounters make him vulnerable to Shang on the final turn of the game. You get him down on 4 and suddenly he starts being Shangable. So, like, this guy feels like he was designed in a lab to be a good playable 5, but I just am not sure he actually meets the criteria. I think, like, I find both him and Johnny really compelling in terms of how am I gonna make this work, but I'm not positive they're, like, actually going to be doing that second thing much. Johnny does because he's cheaper, and he's easier to fit into a deck that is able to fill up lanes and invest in, but it almost feels like Ben wants to be a solo lane winner, and he can't be if you want to trigger his effect. It's a weird sort of tension built into the card. Invisible Woman first steps, activate this turn, your end of turn abilities happen twice, 3/5. Okay, so let's zoom out here. This card is probably pretty good with Doom 2099, is probably absurd with The Thing and Human Torch, and probably pretty damn good if you activate it on 5 with a Mr. Fantastic to get those extra procs. 3/5 is an amazing stat line. We have seen cards that are 3/5 still fail, things like the Ancient one, like it's good, but it's not great, and that's not really, and it's in like a very highly competitive niche. I think this card is quite solid, but I also think it's sort of less important than you might think towards making these other ones work. When I look at this season, I think 3 cards that I'm fairly certain will work in decks that are not all about them, which is to say, I don't think you are going to be playing Johnny only in the Fantastic Four decks. I don't think you're going to be playing Reed only in the Fantastic Four decks. I don't think you're going to be playing Herby only in the Fantastic Four decks. I think those are just going to be cards that are around, maybe as part of like dominant points packages. Ben, on the other hand, I think you might need to be playing in a Fantastic Four deck if you want to make him work, and I think he gets a lot out of this. I think obviously Doom 2099 gets a lot out of this. There's some interesting stuff that comes to mind with like loading up all of these cards, right? And then you have your multiple activates that buff your end of turns that are kind of interesting, right? Like a Doom 2099 Sandman deck, yeah? Like, you can do things like that, and it can be kind of compelling, and it will not be all that bad. That kind of stuff is interesting to me with Invisible Woman First Steps. I don't know how much longevity she has, because I think the way that a lot of people are going to analyze this season is, we talked about this a bit in the Fantasticar, like, all of these cards are going to go together, there's going to be a Fantastic Four deck, it's going to play every single one of them. I think, like, the overwhelmingly more likely thing to me is that Reed and Herby and Johnny end up as good cards, just, like, flat out, where Sue and Ben end up not necessarily seeing a ton of play. It's possible Ben is just, like, an absolute GOAT monster, but that tension is just something I haven't been able to resolve that much, and I don't know exactly how much you get out of doubling a lot of these end-of-turn effects. Doom 2099 is the strongest end-of-turn effect to double that I can think of. So I'm not sure how real that deck is actually going to be. Whereas the other ones, it's like, I think I see them as stronger outside of the context of building a full Fantastic Four deck than I do inside of the context of building a full Fantastic Four deck. I'm interested to see how this ends up developing. I really am. Because, first of all, I think it's like, I like Invisible Woman, the character. I actually read, in preparation for this season, kind of, like, I was reading comics last night, and I read the entire Ryan North Fantastic Four run, and I came away from it like, damn, I really like the Fantastic Four. Okay, cool, I like this. So, I would be someone who really wants to play all 4 of these together. I would want to do that. I would really want to do that. I'd be interested to see how it ends up going down. I hope that is what happens. I worry it's just going to be the super cheap discounters and scalers. Those are the good ones. And then everything that requires an investment, you're asking me to do too much. All right, y'all. Thanks so much. I have been KMBest. You have been phenomenal. And I will see you in the next one, which will be an examination of Clea. This season drops in about a week. I hope you enjoy. As always, remember to like and subscribe. I will see you next time. You have been phenomenal.